Hey everyone, welcome back to Shop Life. In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to replace a valve cover gasket on an E90 335i. So this engine right here is an N54. It's going to be in the 135, the 335s, and any of the other 3.5 twin turbos. This is not the same process for the N55, which is a single turbo edition that was put in later 335 models, but this is the one that will work for most of the E90s and the E82s and whatnot. So pretty much the symptoms that we're facing here is whenever the car is running, or even when it's off, oil is leaking onto the exhaust. So whenever the car is running, it'll start smoking up all that oil that leaked. It's gotten to the point where it's leaking even when the car is on. Usually what will happen is the oil will accumulate while the car is off. It'll leak out of that valve cover onto the exhaust. When you first turn the car on, you'll start seeing smoke come out from the exhaust area in the engine compartment, and then it'll just eventually clear up. You might see a few drops on your parking lot, you might not. Besides that, another symptom that you might have is whenever your heater is on, you're going to start smelling oil burning in through the vents pretty much. So let's go and get started. What we have here is pretty much a bone stock 335i N54. Few things that are going to be messed up on almost most of the cars if you buy secondhand are this cabin filter cover. Pretty much all these bolts and the tabs, a lot of people either break them or they lose them. They might be missing. So if I skip a few steps here and there, it's because this part is broken and there's no way for me to show you how to remove it. So the tools that you're going to need. So you're definitely going to need a couple of external torque socket sets. I would get a couple long, deep wall, and then a couple of short ones like this. All these tools right here, as you see, are from Harbor Freight. You can get all of this stuff at your local Harbor Freight for less than like 150 bucks. This is also a good time to replace your spark plugs and your ignition coils. If you decide to do that, you are going to need a special 14 millimeter 12-point socket. You can find these at AutoZone. You're gonna need a couple of wrenches, open-ended, hex sockets, normal sockets, 1/4-inch drive, 3/8 drive, a couple of extensions, needle nose pliers, and then if you are changing your spark plugs and ignition coils, make sure you get all 6, don't just do one, because usually if you do one, you're going to end up having issues later on with misfires and whatnot. Another good thing, if you're out of warranty and you want to go ahead and replace your injectors, if you're experiencing any other misfires or something like that, you can go ahead and put new injectors in. You're going to be there while we're replacing the valve cover anyways. Alright, so first what we're going to do is we're going to remove all the cabin filter assembly and all the covers so we can remove the engine cover as well. So this is going to be held in with 8 millimeter bolts. There's going to be one right here, one right here. This tab is broken. One on this side right here, one on the corner, one on this side, and one on this corner. Pull it straight out. Go to remove these covers on both sides. There's going to be a tab. One tab right here, just lift it up. One tab on the back, same way, lift it up. If you have these rubber grommets attached, go ahead and pull them off, just like that. So here's that one tab, here's the other tab. Now you're gonna have an 8 millimeter bolt here. This one's missing, so go ahead and remove that. You should also have this wire right here, someone zip tied it down here. But you see these little tabs right here? They're gonna be pushed in onto this actual housing right here. So just lift them up and pull it off. Same thing on this side, lift up the tabs. Remove any of the rubber things if they're there. Then you should have a bolt here. This one's also missing. It's gonna be 8 millimeter. Go ahead and pull that off. Disconnect the connector right here. And then same thing with the harness, just lift it off of these tabs. Now you're gonna use a flathead to remove these wiring boxes right here. So they're gonna be held in with the tab like this. See, what you wanna do is you wanna push this tab down and pull it out. Just like that. Push this tab in, pull it out. Pull this tab off right here. There's 3 of them. Once you have that off, you can go ahead and pull the wire out. Lift this up and pull it straight out. What you're gonna have is these 3 tabs right here that are gonna be on this rubber. If your rubber falls off right here, go ahead and push it back on. I'm gonna remove this cover right here so we can remove the strut bar. Use a flathead, turn it, lift off, The one inside here is going to be an E18, so external Torx 18. The one out here is going to be an E14. You don't have to remove the one in the center all the way, you can just loosen it up. You are going to remove this one all the way. Pull the bolt off and then slide this out. Alright, so in order to make this process easier, we can go ahead and remove all these cables from the DME box. In order to do that, first you want to go ahead and disconnect your battery. To disconnect your battery, turn this knob right here and pull it straight off. You can just disconnect the negative and you'll be fine. So just use a 10mm, loosen that nut, and then pull off the battery. Now let's remove this DME cover. In order to do that, push this tab in and lift this black section up. Do the same on both sides. Slide these tabs over to unlock, and then you can go ahead and lift up. If this tab on this side doesn't come out all the way, you're gonna have to push the two black sections in and lift that up as well. Now pull off this positive terminal cover. Remove this 13mm nut. Now we're gonna disconnect these cables. Once again, you don't have to do this. This just makes the process a lot easier. You do want to pull off this ground off of this harness that goes to the shock tower. It's going to be held in with a 10mm nut. Now we can remove these connectors, push the two tabs in, and then pull it off. Alright, so if you have a second hand or some kind of helper, or even if you have like zip ties or bungee cords, what you can do, so you don't have to remove all of these connectors, it'll make it a little bit easier. Still remove this ground right here, and then just put these cables onto the cowl. That way you have enough space to remove the entire valve cover. Now we're going to remove this engine vanity cover. It's held in with 4 hex 5 bolts. 2 in the front, 1 right here, and 1 in this corner. We're missing these 2, so we're not going to take those out, obviously. Once you have all the bolts out, lift up from the back first, and pull it straight out. Now we're going to remove all these coil packs. You can label them. Some of these coils will be stubborn, so just use like some kind of extension, put it through, lift up. Now that we have the coil packs out, we can remove this harness and we can discharge the fuel rail. To remove this harness, you're gonna have to remove the 8mm nuts. There's 1 right here, 1 right here, 1 right here. These are all for the ground straps. Then you're also gonna have to remove all of the plugs for the injectors. There's 6 of those. Then you're gonna remove the E10 right here, and another E10 right here. This will allow you to remove this whole box. Now that we have all the grounds off, let's remove the connectors for the injectors. What you want to use is a very skinny flathead and just pry on the tab just a little bit. That way it'll release the connector. So there's a tab that covers this section right here, and it clips into this. So what you want to do is you want to pry the tab off of the injector and then pull this connector out. Now we're going to remove these 2 connectors, push the metal clip in and pull up. Push this clip in and then just pull straight up. Go ahead and route them out. Now we can remove these 2 E10s. Once you have the E10s removed, lift it up. In order to access this lower connector, we're going to have to remove this vacuum hose, which we're going to have to do anyways to remove the valve cover. Alright, so I went ahead and pulled this hose off. Let me go and show you guys how it works. So you have 4 tabs, 1 right there, 1 on this side, 1 right here, and 1 right here. So there's an O-ring right here which is what is actually holding most of that pressure in. So what you have to do is you have to release all 4 of these tabs. So you could use like two skinny screwdrivers right here, pry these 2 sections off, and then just use another flathead and pry the bottom and put a little bit of pressure on it away from the actual connector, and put another flathead on the top, just pull it straight off. Do that for both sides, and make sure you're very careful. You don't want to flex this too much because these plastic pipes will crack. Although this is a good time to go ahead and replace it if your car has a lot of miles. Now we're going to go ahead and lift up all these O2 sensor wires so we have more access to disconnect the rest of the connectors. Go ahead and push this tab down and disconnect the O2 sensor. Same with this one. Go ahead and pull this wiring off of all these brackets. Now we're going to disconnect this sensor on the fuel rail itself. The tab is on the underside. So you want to push this tab in and pull away. Now you want to go ahead and lift up this O2 sensor out of this plastic bracket. A quick way to do this is use a flathead, pry against it just a little bit, and lift it straight up and out. Go ahead and pull this wiring all the way through. Put it to the side. Now we can lift this somewhat out of the way. It'll make it easier to pull the whole valve cover off. Now we're going to pull off these vacuum lines from these canisters right here. Just get your hand underneath and pull off one at a time. There's one. If your hands aren't as long and skinny as mine, you might want to just go ahead and pull off this 10mm bracket. There's also a 10mm nut all the way at the bottom that you'll need an extension for. And there's one more nut. Now just pull off this bottom section. Bam. I just want to put these to the side. You don't want to bend them too much since they are a little bit hard line vacuum tubing. Now we're going to disconnect these fuel lines. You're going to need a 14mm open-ended wrench. I'm going to start doing it very slowly. I'm going to start pulling all of them off. Go ahead and remove this connector for the fuel rail as well to 17. Now we're going to move this air box off. That way we can pull the whole fuel rail off. Push these 2 tabs in and pull up. Get it off of the air box right here. Go ahead and pull off this section right here. Now we're going to remove these hose clamps. One right here and one upstream right here. You can use a flathead or a 6mm socket. Now you want to pull off these rubber grommets that are holding these wires in place. Just lift them straight up. Pull off this connector so you don't bend it too much. Once you have it off of all the rubber grommets, just go ahead and pull it straight out. Now we can remove this fuel rail. It's held in with 4 bolts. One right here, one right here, one right here, and one right here. You can pull off these plastic brackets that cover the bolts by pushing them down and then lifting them up and out. Now I'm going to remove all 4 of these bolts. They're all 11mm bolts. Now that we have all 4 bolts off, you can just slide this off. Move these vacuum lines out of the way. Now you have to remove all of the E10 bolts around the entire valve cover. So we have one right here, right here, right here, right there, following all the way down, right there, right there, right there, right there, right there, right in this corner, one more in the back corner, one in this top corner, right here, right here, right there, right there, right there, right there, and you have some inside. Pretty much wherever you see this little groove, you're gonna have a bolt. Right there, right there, right there, right there, right here, right in this corner, and then you're gonna have these long 10mm studs pretty much. Pull that one off, another E10, stud, E10, stud. So a stud is where the ground was for the whole harness, where these grounds were plugging in. So we're gonna remove all of those. Alright, so for the studs, make sure you get a really deep 10 socket and go ahead and pull those off. They're not all going to come all the way out, but just make sure they're all the way loose and ready to pull out. And then all of these are already loosened up, so we're going to start pulling them off. They're going to be all different sizes in terms of the washer that's there. So not all different, but there's going to be a couple of different sizes. So what you want to do is you want to pull it off with this washer. It's not going to come out without it. So just go ahead and pull that off. So you saw this corner one is going to be a little bit bigger than the other ones. So I've got most of the bolts off and most of the washers, as you can see. But some there's really hard to get off, so I'm just going to leave them on there. I'm just going to make sure and be very careful that they don't fall into the engine or they don't fall out. And if they do, I'll hear it and I'll just pull them out then. But so what you want to do is you want to be very careful. This is a plastic valve cover, so you don't want to pry on it too much. But there's a few spots where you can, like this corner right here. You can go ahead and start lifting it from right there, and then get a little pry bar or some kind of wooden thing that won't really crack anything or mar the surfaces, and just start lifting up slowly. Use some kind of trim tool that's plastic, and that will also help you wedge it in there. Alright, now you just want to have all these wires held. Alright, so here's the old gasket. Let's go ahead and pull it off. If it's very brittle, you just want to be very careful and make sure you don't break any parts off into the engine. It's going to be a lot more brittle on the side with the exhaust because that's the side that gets the hottest. Alright, so the overall sludge buildup is to the minimum. That gasket was really brittle. I'm pretty sure it's the original gasket, and this car is 120K. So what we're going to do now is we're going to pull off the rest of these spark plug tube seals. Pull out any dirt or debris that you see. You can use some kind of lint-free rag to clean all the mating surfaces of where the gasket's going to go. So clean all that up. Don't try to use any type of solvent. Don't spray anything directly on the engine. And just make sure you don't let anything else fall in here. So you want to work really quickly so no dirt or debris gets inside. Alright, so here's the new gasket. Let's go ahead and put it on. Alright, so now that we have the valve cover seated, I'm going to go ahead and thread in some of these bolts that are already there. That way the valve cover doesn't move around. Then we're going to go ahead and put the spark plug tube seals back in. Now we're going to go ahead and start putting all these bolts back in. Make sure the washers seat properly. The biggest one is on this top corner. So I'm going to go ahead and put all these bolts in and then go ahead and tighten them down. You don't want to over tighten them. I'll list the torque spec down below. But if you over tighten them, then you might crack the plastic valve cover. Alright, so I've got all the bolts in and tightened. What you want to do is, so just a quick tip, this bolt right here is one of the big washers. Same with the other corner all the way on this corner. That bolt also has a big washer. So what you want to do first is go ahead and put all the bolts and washers in. Go ahead and push them all the way in, make sure the washer seats all the way. And then go ahead and hand tighten all of them. So don't use a socket wrench or anything, just hand tighten everything. And then once you're done, you want to start with the middle and go into star pattern. And then just start tightening everything. They will bottom out. So when they bottom out, that's when you know you're done. So don't try to put more pressure after they bottom out. So go ahead and do it in star pattern, torque everything down. Once all that's done, make sure your spark plug tube seals are in. And make sure the gasket is seated properly. Just look around, feel for the whole valve cover, make sure everything is proper, and then double check all the bolts. Once we're done with that, now we can start putting everything back together. So what we're going to do first is we're gonna go ahead and put the fuel rail back. So route these vacuum lines. Now let's go and get the fuel rail. Get the 4 bolts, start hand tightening them first. We'll start with this corner. And once again, these are 11mm bolts. Once you have all 4 of the 11mm bolts tightened, push these clips back. Go ahead and reroute these connectors. Plug in the fuel rail sensor. We're gonna go ahead and tighten this fuel rail connector right here. Once again, this is a 17mm. We're gonna go ahead and reroute the O2 sensor wires. Now let's put the airbox in. Go ahead and plug this connector back in. Let's tighten these hose clamps back up. The one on this side as well. Go ahead and put on these rubber grommets for the harnesses as well. Now let's go ahead and put on this CCV hose. Push it in. You'll hear it click. Now let's go ahead and get all these injector fuel hoses hooked back up. So what you want to do is just get it lined up, thread it in with your hand. Get both of them threaded in all the way. Do that for all of them and then just go around and tighten all of them all at once. So I'm gonna go ahead and do the rest. Use a 14mm open end wrench and tighten all these. Go ahead and hook up the vacuum hoses on the bottom. Route these vacuum lines back, and we're gonna plug in these connectors down here. Let's go ahead and plug up all these injectors. Make sure you have the right one in the right spot. The best way to do that is by just lining up all of the grounds. You'll hear and you'll feel a little click, so make sure you feel that, and that means it's seated properly. Now we can put the 3 8mm nuts on each one of the grounds. Put both of the E10s back for this harness, the coil pack harness. Go ahead and get this to sit properly again. Double check all the connectors that you unplugged. Make sure everything's plugged back in. Put all the coil packs in. Tighten all the ground nuts. Tighten all the E10s. Put the cover back on the DME. We can put this ground strap back on for this harness. That's a 10mm nut. Put the 13 for the positive terminal back on. Put this cover back on. Only thing we have left now is to put these one 10mm bolt and two 10mm nuts on this vacuum holders. Let's get all the coil packs back in. Make sure you don't forget to plug them in. Now this will be a good time to go ahead and hook your battery back up, prime the fuel system a few times, double check all these fuel hoses for any leaks before you button everything else back up. In order to prime the fuel system, all you want to do is just put the key in. Don't put your foot on the brake. Press the start button. Wait like 10 seconds. Cut it back off. Do it again. Wait about 10 seconds. Cut it back off. And do it again. And then we'll go ahead and turn it on and just double check. All the gas lines are good. Let me turn it off and put everything else back together. Let's put this cover back on. There should be 4 hex 5 screws, 2 in the front, 2 in the back. Slide your strut bar back in. Tighten up this E14 first. Tighten up this E18. Put this cover back on. Make sure the rubber is seated properly. Slide it in. You want to line this with that. Get this wire back in. Now go ahead and put the two 8mm bolts back in. One on this side, one on the other side. Route this rubber piece. Underneath and over. Plug this connector back in. Clip this cover back on. On this side as well. Clip this cover back on. This connector is supposed to go right here, but they have it zip tied here, so I'm just going to leave it. Get your air filter housing back on. You're going to have 2 8s in the front and then 4 8s all across. Don't forget this tab that covers the strut bar. It goes in that angle. Then all you want to do is just turn it to lock it in place. Alright, so that's it for this DIY. If you guys have any questions, feel free to leave a comment down below. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for more DIYs.